Once have I heard on one occasion the Blessed One was Living in Kanjangagala in the grove of some Mukila trees, Mukilu trees. Never heard of that kind of tree before. Then the Brahmin student Uttara, a pupil of a Brahma Pararasatya, went to the Blessed One and exchanged greetings with him. When this courteous and amiable talk was finished, he sat down at one side. The Buddha then asked him, Uttara, does your Brahmin teacher teach his disciples the development of the faculties? He does, Master Gotama. But Uttara, how does he teach his disciples the development of the faculties? Here, Master Gotama, one does not see forms with the eye. One does not hear sounds with the ear. That is how the Brahmin teacher teaches his disciples the development of the faculties. If that were so, Uttara, then a blind and deaf man will have developed his faculties, according to what your teacher says. For a blind man does not see forms with his eyes, and a deaf man does not hear sounds with the ear. When this was said, the Brahmin student Uttara sat silent, dismayed, with shoulders drooping and head down, glum and without response. Then, knowing this, the Blessed One addressed the Venerable Ananda. Ananda, the Brahmin teacher, teaches his disciples the development of the faculties in one way. But in the Noble One's discipline, the supreme development of the faculties is otherwise. Now is the time, Blessed One, now is the time, Sublime One, for the Blessed One to teach the supreme development of faculties in the Noble One's discipline. Having heard it from the Blessed One, the monks will remember it. And I can get these pages. Yeah. Okay. Now, this is a real important statement. Then listen, Ananda, and attend closely to what I shall say. Yes, Venerable Sir, the Blessed One said this. Now, Ananda, how is there the supreme development of the faculties in the Noble One's discipline? Here, Ananda, when a monk sees a form with the eye, there arises in him what is agreeable. There arises what is disagreeable. There arises what is both agreeable and disagreeable. He understands thus, there has arisen in me what is agreeable. There has arisen in me what is disagreeable. There has arisen in me what is agreeable and disagreeable. It's neither nor agreeable or disagreeable, actually. But that is conditioned, gross, dependently arisen. This is peaceful, this is sublime, that is equanimity. The agreeable that arose, the disagreeable that arose, the neither agreeable nor disagreeable that arose, cease in him, and equanimity is established. Just as a man with good sight, having opened his eyes, might shut them, or having shut his eyes, might open them, so too concerning anything at all, the agreeable that arose, the disagreeable that arose, the neither agreeable nor disagreeable that arose cease, just as quickly, just as rapidly, just as easily, and equanimity is established. This is called the Noble One's discipline, the supreme development of the faculties regarding forms cognizable by the eye. Again, when a monk hears a sound with the ear, there arises in him what is agreeable, there arises what is disagreeable, there arises what is neither agreeable nor disagreeable. He understands thus, and equanimity is established. Just as a strong man might easily snap his fingers, so too concerning anything at all, the agreeable that arose, the disagreeable that arose, the neither agreeable nor disagreeable that arose cease, just as quickly, just as rapidly, just as easily, and equanimity is established. This is called, in the Noble One's discipline, the supreme development of the faculties regarding sounds cognizable by the ear. Now, when you're practicing one-pointed concentration, when you're trying to just stay on your object of meditation and a sound arises, it can make you boink, and then dislike arises very easily. Sounds are just sounds. They're not good sounds, they're not bad sounds, they're simply sounds. But because the concentration is out of balance with the mindfulness, concentration is much deeper. That's what makes it start. And one of my teachers in Burma, he used to say that a sound is a thorn in the side of the meditators. And the only reason it's a thorn in the side of the meditators is because they're taking that sound personally and not liking it and wanting it to be different than it is. And their concentration is not in balance with their mindfulness. During that time that he was talking about that, he decided that it was time to drill another water well. He drilled the water well right outside the meditation hall, on the side that has all of the screen doors. They had an old engine that sometimes would backfire. And from 8 o'clock in the morning till 6 o'clock at night, it was going arr, arr, arr. So much for the sound being a thorn in your side. And it would stop at 6 o'clock. And for about a half an hour, it was blissfully peaceful and calm. Now, his meditation center, when he first started it, it was outside of town. But the town started growing around the meditation center, and it turned into a major street. Now, when the Burmese drive, they drive by sound. That means honking their horn. A long horn means, a long beep means something, a short beep means something else. And about 6:30, there was a sidewalk outside the wall of the monastery, and that's where they would set up their tea and loudspeakers and play music and it was loud. And that happened until about 10 o'clock at night. Then they would turn that off, and that's when the neighbors would start up their generators so that they had lights at night. And they'd run the generators all night. So as a result, my practice was letting a sound be there without paying attention to it, even when it backfired. They didn't have any muffler on this motor either, so it was really loud. So people come, in this country, you're supposed to tiptoe in the meditation hall, not making any sound at all. If you close the door loudly, people will complain about the sound of the door being closed. One time I was at a meditation center, or a retreat, and it was like 95 outside, and it was not an air-conditioned building. So I turned the fan on, and people complained because of the sound of the fan. Now, what was the real problem of this? Well, they were practicing one-pointed concentration, and any sound at all, the wind sometimes would catch a door and slam. And everybody in the meditation hall would jump a little bit, and then they would write their notes to the teacher about the sound bothering their meditation. But that doesn't sound like what we're talking about here. A sound is a vibration that hits the ear, and the ear and mind recognizes it as a sound. Oh, that's only part of the noises that happened. When they finally stopped drilling the well, there was it was about 100 people that worked for the railroad, and their boss told them all that they had to come to this monastery and practice meditation for a week. These guys were not interested in doing any meditation, but because the boss said it, they did it. Sitting in a meditation hall, people started doing things to entertain themselves. Passing gas was one of the things. The louder it could go, the better. Because they were, in that culture, they spit a lot. It's like the Chinese do a lot of spitting. But they didn't just spit, they hawked. Now this is while you're sitting in the meditation hall and they're sitting right beside you, okay? They had some spittoons out there. But they didn't just let it drop in. They spit it in. And sometimes you'd feel a little bit speck hitting here and there. And then sometimes they would get up and they would do the walking meditation. There was one guy that was absolutely brilliant at belching on every step. And it was loud. And everybody in the meditation hall knew that this guy was doing his walking meditation. Now, can you imagine that here in this country? Anybody doing that sort of thing? They'd get stoned. Meditation's supposed to be quiet. But we didn't complain about it. It was just something else to let go of. It's just a sound. So the whole point of this is, when you hear a sound, you allow the sound to be there without liking or disliking it. And it's the same way with all of the 5 faculties. With your eyes, your ears, your nose, your tongue, and your body. It doesn't matter. In Asia, there's ants. And I mean, there's ants. A lot of different kinds of ants. And we were smart. We got this chalk from China that you put around you. It wasn't on a rug. It was on a wood floor. So you put this chalk around you, and the ants would walk right up to that and turn around and walk away. So we didn't get bit by the ants while we're meditating. But after a little bit, the ants started to get smart. And they would go to the wall, go up the wall, go across to the ceiling, and dive bomb. And you'd be sitting there, and I didn't have this kind of shirt on. It was just bare shoulder, and I'd be sitting there, and I'd feel an ant. And they always like to bite someplace that's particularly sensitive. So how much better do we have things here, and still people complain? See, the whole thing is, you have to be able to watch your mind. Things are not always going to happen the way you want them to. What does your mind do with that? If there's a sight that's not pleasant, or a sound that's not pleasant, and it disturbs you, why does it disturb you? Because I don't like it. Who has some craving in their mind with the I don't like? Who wants things to be different than they actually are? Now, what is one of the definitions of suffering? Not getting what you want or getting what you don't want. That's one of the definitions of suffering. And it always comes down to who suffers. See, the practice of 6 R's is very good. It's very easy to carry with you, but you have to remember to let your thoughts, your opinions, your ideas, you have to let them go. Your opinions, your ideas, your story, your emotional response causes the birth of action, and that leads to sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, despair. And that's how this whole mass of suffering arises. It's a real interesting phenomena that if you have a desire for something to happen in a particular way, that desire in meditation will stop you from attaining it. I had a good sitting this morning, I want a good sitting this afternoon. But it's not coming right the way I want it to. So I try harder. And then you start getting restless. And then you try harder. And now your mind is thinking all kinds of stuff, and you're really a long ways away from your object of meditation. And that desire to have your meditation be like it was doesn't go away until you let it go away. You'll hold on to it. And then you 6R and you come and tell me, well, the 6R stuff doesn't work. Well, you know it works. But there is something causing that restlessness to arise. What is that something? I want this to be a good meditation. What happens when you do that? You start leaning out of the present moment, waiting for the next present moment to be better. Okay? And it turns into a vicious cycle. You have to let go of your expectations. I really would like this to happen the way I want it to. Okay, you can like that all you want, but that doesn't mean that's what you're going to get. It's letting go and being in the present moment without likes and dislikes, without longing for the meditation to be better than it is. And sometimes the longing can be very, very subtle. It doesn't have to be a big desire. Your meditation is great. You've been sitting in the meditation for a long time and it seems like nothing's happening. Well, I've been waiting for the Nibbana to come. My meditation is deep enough. Well, what happens if you let go of waiting because you don't know what's going to happen next? Nobody knows what's going to happen next. So you let go of that little subtle attachment. I want this to happen and I'll wait here until it does. That stops that from occurring. So you develop your beginner's mind. You don't know what's going to happen next. And whatever happens next is okay. It has to be okay because whatever arises, it's there. That's the truth. What do you do with that? Well, I've had this feeling before. And I always try to stuff the feeling, stop the feeling from distracting me from my meditation. And now you're falling into your old habitual emotional tendency of trying to control your meditation so it will be the way I want it to be. And then you start getting into some kind of action. It's the birth of some kind of action to try to adjust, and you adjust in a hard way. And always the adjustment causes mind to get tight when you do it that way. Because you have a particular desire that you want it to be the way you want it to be, when you want it to be that way. And reality is not matching your desires. So what do? Old habits mean that you keep on trying to do it in the same old way, expecting a different result. Okay, Einstein said the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. Okay, we're all crazy. It's okay to be insane. But when you start seeing that you're causing yourself pain and you're always handling that in exactly the same way, it's time to try something different. No, always the try something different is to allow it to be there and back away from it. It's not yours. You didn't ask it to come up. But as soon as it came up, you took possession of it and tried to control it. And then you cause yourself pain. You cause yourself suffering. And you can't blame somebody else. You can't blame an external source for your suffering, because you're doing this to yourself. You're causing your own pain. And you keep on doing it over and over again. Okay. That same kind of suffering is going to continue to come up over and over again until you learn that that's not the way to handle it. What do? You use the 6 R's, but you ask the question. What's the cause and condition of this feeling arising? What's the cause and condition of this blockage? Whatever it happens to be. And when you ask that question and you continue on with your practice, your intuition will tell you what the cause and condition is for that suffering. Now you have the insight. Now you have the answer. What are you going to do with that answer? How do you adjust so that you don't have that causing so much pain and causing so much suffering at any one of the sense doors, any one of these faculties? So you ask the question and the answer comes, well, I'm doing this. This is the cause of that suffering. Okay, now you have understanding. As soon as you understand what the real cause of the suffering is, then you can come up with a different way of handling whatever it is that arose. The biggest problem with this is it's too simple. All of the answers that the Buddha gave for overcoming suffering, he told you the simplest way to let it go. He told you how to recognize, how to ask the question, and how to let it go. So when that insight comes, well, I've been doing it this, and I don't like that, and I'm trying to overcome that. When you get the answer as to what the problem is, the answer always comes, let go of that dislike of the present moment, let go of that desire for the present moment to be in a particular way. 6R. Come back to your object of meditation. And then you'll get a sense of relief. Now, what's your mind really trying to show you? What your old habits are and how you're attached to them and how to let them go. But I always have sadness arise. Okay, fine. Whose sadness is it? Whose dislike of it is it? Who's trying to control it? And who makes it bigger because of that desire to control? You know what the answer is. This is my sadness. This is me. This is who I am. And it always comes up. And I always try to stuff it. I always try to make it stop. I always try to change it. But the truth is sadness. And it's okay for it to be there. Has to be, because that's the truth. So you allow that feeling to be there without trying to change it, without trying to make it any different than it is. And the allowing it to be there means that you're releasing it. You're not keeping your attention on it anymore. Now you relax that tightness in your head caused by that. Little smile in your mind, come back to your object of meditation. Oh, 6 R's again. But the sadness didn't go away. I've done this a dozen times. I've done it 24 times. And it's still there. So, it's okay. It can be there as long as it wants to be there. My mother died a couple of years ago. There was sadness. And it's okay for the sadness to be there. I miss her a lot. When you try to control what arises in the present moment with your thoughts and your opinions and your ideas and your concepts, that causes an old habitual tendency to arise, and that is where your emotional attachments are, and heavy-duty identification with those things. And there's a lot of pain. And what do you do with the pain? Try to push it down. I don't want that pain there. Well, the truth, anytime you fight with the truth, anytime you try to change the truth, you're fighting with reality because it's there. Now, I used to work with a hospice, and one of the things that they've discovered is that a family member dies and people get real sad. And if they don't recognize what the grief is and they try to control it and push it away and pretend that they're not sad, at some time in the next 2 years, they're going to have some kind of major problem in their body. Why is that? Because they tried to ignore the pain. They tried to control the pain. They tried to distract themselves so they didn't see the pain. And that turned into a habitual tendency. And that pain and suffering got stuck somewhere in their body. The thing with death in the family, death of a loved one, whatever it happens to be, it doesn't necessarily have to be in your family, is that people feel helpless. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to say when there's a death in the family. So, what can you do? You can radiate loving kindness to yourself. You can radiate loving kindness to all of the family members. You can radiate loving kindness to the dead person. But when you do that, what happens is that grief that's there that you're trying to push down and not allow it to be let go, that grief starts to dissipate because you're doing something that is not only helping you, but it's helping everyone else around you. Now, grief is a real interesting word. It's That's a concept. Sometimes grief can be sadness. Sometimes grief can be anger. It can be any variety of emotions. And that's what you call grief. But what is grief really? It is whatever that feeling is that arises, that's my feeling. That's who I am. And I don't like that feeling, and I don't want it there, and I want it to go away. That's real grief. Now, remember back to the instructions in the meditation. You're sitting very still, very quietly, you're not moving your body at all, and a pain arises. First thing you'll notice is you have thoughts about that pain. And the more you think about the pain, the bigger and more intense the pain becomes. So what do? First, you let go of your thinking about it and relax. Now you see that tight mental fist wrapped around there. I don't like it. I don't want it there. That's aversion. But when you notice that the truth is it's there and it has to be okay for it to be there, then you allow it to be there. Okay? What almost everybody does is it's like you take a hot charcoal out of the barbecue and you put it in your hand and you say, boy, that's hot. And so what you do is you start squeezing tighter and tighter and tighter, and that's what you do with your mind, trying to control that pain, instead of letting it go. Okay, the pain's still going to be there, but it's not going to be quite so intense. And it has to be all right for it to be there because that's the truth. Now you relax. Smile. Come back to your object of meditation. When somebody dies, that pain is going to be there a lot. That dissatisfaction of they're not there anymore, and it makes me sad. Okay. Let it be there. Relax, smile, come back. If you have an opinion, you have a concept that this is never going to go away and you're always going to be sad, guess what happens? The 6 R's don't work so good. And that pain and that suffering comes up over and over and over again. It can be so intense you feel like your heart is getting torn out of your chest. That's how much pain there can be. And it's okay. Your heart can take it. Can you? What do you do with it? You allow it to be, you relax. Let go of your opinions, let go of your thoughts, let go of your concepts, let go of the story. And when you do that, your old habitual tendency of trying to think the feeling won't come up. So it's a continual process of letting go of your thoughts, letting go of your opinions, letting go of your ideas about the way it's supposed to be, and allowing it to be there and relaxing into it. Now, when you do that with somebody that's very dear that just died, you still can have the sadness there, but the pain is not there anymore. You'll still have memories of that person, and it won't be painful memories. So you see, this practice works very, very well, especially when you let go of opinions, ideas, concepts. Oh, but the tightness doesn't go away. It will. As you soften and let go of your attachment to it. That's how it works. So the more you realize that you have old habitual tendencies that always cause pain to arise, the more you are aware of how that process works, the easier it is to recognize it every time it comes up, and the faster you start letting go of the suffering. And what happens when you let go of the suffering? Your mind starts to get equanimity in it. Your mind starts to get real balance with it. Well, the sadness is there still. Okay, so it's okay for it to be there. Now you've let go of the attachment of wanting it to be different than it is. You have let go of suffering. And the thing, especially with the death in the family, is everything can be fine for a period of time, and there's not a lot of sadness and dislike, and you'll be sitting down and eating, and all of a sudden you're lonesome. You miss that person very much, and that whole thing comes up again. And the pain, and the suffering, and the desire for that not to have happened. So you have to let go of not liking that feeling, because the truth is, it's painful, it's hard to let go of, but what else can you do? Did you ask that feeling to arise? Can you make that feeling go away? So what else can you do but allow that feeling of sadness to be there? And 6R, all of the thoughts, relax, send somebody loving and kind thoughts. And at that time, the somebody that you really need to send the loving kind thoughts to, yourself. And it'll come up over and over again, over even as long as a year. Okay, fine. But when you let go of that craving, you let go of that dislike of the present moment and the want to control the present moment to be the way you want it to be, when you let go of that, then the memories of that person that died, they're still there. But the pain isn't there anymore. You've let go of the grief. So the more you can notice that all of the 5 faculties, they are real when they arise. You can't shut those faculties down. When you see something, you see it. When you hear something, you hear it. Now, what are you going to do about it? What are you going to do with a bad smell, or a bad taste, or pain in your body, or sound that's not so nice, or sights that are not so nice. What are you going to do with these? Use the 6 R's. That's the key. That's what you really, really need to keep in mind. Let go of your opinions about whether it should be there or not. I had to do that when I was in Burma and they started up that motor every morning. Okay, the truth is, it's there, it's going to be there all day, fine. Then the tea shops, they were brilliant because there would be one tape and there might be 6 tea shops. So they run it down to the next one, so you get to hear it over again. They run it down to the next one, you get to hear it over again. Now you can say, this is not appropriate, this is not a place that I want to do my meditation, and that did happen. And the teacher would say, fine, you can leave. He couldn't change it. He couldn't make it any different than it was because that's what had to be done at that time. Yeah, but a meditation center is supposed to be super quiet. Well, and what happens if it's not? There was one monk that he got on the internet and he ordered a pair of earmuffs. So he was wearing his earmuffs so he could, quote, meditate. But did he? Really? So the whole thing comes down to your acceptance of the present moment without judging it, without condemning it. Okay, there's sound. Fine, there's sound. I can still be happy even if there is sound. I can be happy even if there is smells. I can be happy if there's sights that are absolutely horrible, because that's the truth of the present moment. Anytime you try to fight with the truth, you are going to suffer. And you are there. Used to be a program on TV called You Are There. And what happens when you are there? There's this tightness that happens. And then these thoughts about, well, it shouldn't be like that. That's not the way it's supposed to be. And then the emotional, well, I don't like that. The anger, the frustration, the sadness, the fear, whatever. Then you have your birth of action. And quite often your birth of action is trying to stuff it. Stop it from bothering you. Now, what did the Buddha say about that? Well, if you're blind and you're deaf, then you've got no problems with seeing and hearing. Other than that, there's pleasant sights, there's painful sights. There's pleasant sounds, there's painful sounds. Now, how do you develop that equanimity to these kind of disturbances? And that's what they are. You can call them hindrances if you want, but they're disturbances. What do you do with something like that? First, you have to let go of your opinions, your ideas. Develop that mind that is the beginner's mind. It's there, I don't know what to do with it, but I know what the instructions are, so I'll try the instructions again. Let go of your thinking about, relax. Let go of that tight mental fist, relax. Bring up a wholesome object. Stay with the wholesome object for as long as you can. So it's a real interesting kind of practice, because it doesn't matter what arises. What does your mind do with that? How much suffering do you cause yourself because it's not what I want? It's supposed to be this way, and I like it this way, but I don't like it that way. And with that kind of attachment to an opinion, a thought, an idea, that starts clouding the way you see the present moment. And that makes suffering a lot bigger and more intense. So, you always try to handle it in the same way when this kind of thing comes up. But you know it doesn't work, then be mindful that it doesn't work the way you handled it before. And try something new. Try letting go of your opinions of the way you think it should be, and accept the way it is. Now, this doesn't mean if somebody comes up and pokes you in the face that you don't defend yourself. You do. But you don't do it with anger. And what do you do after he's hit you and gone away? What are you doing with your mind? Most people, they're playing that whole scene over again in their mind. What this other person did, how much pain it caused, what I did, what I wish I would have done. And that person was absolutely wrong, and I'm right. Now, what is that? All of those thoughts, what do you call those kinds of thoughts? Those kind of thoughts are called clinging. And craving. Craving always arises first. It's always there. And then your story. And then your emotional, habitual tendency. What does equanimity do for you in your daily life? It gives you a sense of balance, right? So the emotional tendency of, I don't like this, I'm happy, I'm sad, I'm happy, I'm sad. These kind of things will happen all day, and then you get so tired by the end of the day that I got to lay down and take rest. But when you have equanimity, the high highs and the low lows start to balance out a little bit. Doesn't mean that there's going to be easy sailing for the rest of your life. Welcome to the real world. Some things are going to be nice and some things are going to be not so nice. But what do you do with that in your mind? When you have equanimity, the emergency of the cause of the suffering seems to disappear. You don't have so much emergency. When you have an emotional attachment to something being the way you want it to be, it turns into this huge problem. And it's so big, there's no way to get over it. There's no way to go around it. It's just this problem. Now, what can I do to solve this problem? You let go of your attachment to the problem, and you let go of the way you think things are supposed to be and accept the way things are. Now, that huge problem is this little tiny bump in the road. The one that was so big before, and it's an emergency, I have to do something about this. That's your emotional mind. That's your habitual tendencies coming up. And that's what causes a lot of suffering. So when you develop your equanimity, now you're going to be able to see, okay, this feeling at the eye, at the ear, at the nose, at the tongue, at the body is causing me all of these problems. Okay? Okay, so there's problems. Last spring, we had a tornado hit our land. Tore down a bunch of stuff. I happened to be in town with Kema, and somebody called up and said the tornado came and it knocked all these cabins around and they're upside down and all of this problem. And she came out and told me, and what was my response to that? I laughed. Okay. Well, aren't you upset? Well, not particularly. Why should I get upset by something like that? Well, your cabin is upside down. I said, well, let's wait and see. So we got to the land, and there was trees in the way, and there was a lot of damage that was done. My cabin got picked up and moved over about 6 feet and then put down again. So I went inside my cabin to see all of the mess. You know, everything is going to be off the shelves and it's going to be a real mess. And I walked in and I had this small table where I had some crystals that were fairly tall, about that big around. I had 3 of them on the table. They were still standing on the table. And yeah, it was a hassle. There were some problems, but okay, there's problems. See, the equanimity starts to kick in. And then it's, well, we got to do this, and we got to do that, and we have all these trees down, now we got to cut them up, and we want to chip them and use the chips for other things. And the real problem, the biggest problem, was our big trees got knocked down. Now there's no shade there. And that's a problem. So we got to plant some more trees. Okay.
Just where the monks are, not where the students were.
Yeah.
Nothing was touched up in that area.
And we knew that there was warnings on the radio and all this kind of stuff, so we knew that there was going to be some kind of problem somewhere in the area. And we went into the bank, and the bank people, they said, well, they're telling us we got to go in the vault and close the door. Well, if they do that, they're not going to get out till tomorrow. And I was standing there and I said, you don't have to worry about being hit by a tornado here. I'm here. Those kind of things don't happen to me. And I wasn't at the center. Most of the time I'm in my cabin doing this or that. And I wasn't there. So that happened. But where I was, it didn't happen. And it's been like that before, with kinds of weird things. We had high winds a couple of years before. And my mother was sick at the time, and I was going to go to California, come to California and be with her. Now, always when we say we're going to leave at this time, we're always between a half an hour and an hour behind. This particular morning, we're on time. We're leaving. And I'm going, wow, this is really something. How unusual. We get all the way into St. Louis. The high winds knocked down hundreds and hundreds of trees. It took her 6 hours to get home. It was an hour and a half drive there because the trees are on the road. Didn't happen when I was there. So I have no fear of those kind of things. It's not going to happen if I'm there. Anyway, you can get mad at the wind, but what good does that do? So you have some equanimity with it. Okay, there's a lot of trees down. We got to do this, we got to do that. Okay, fine, we can do that. Might take a long time to recover, fine. It has to be fine because that's the way it is. Disliking it, wanting it to be different than it is, certainly doesn't help you to get the job done in the present moment. But having a light, buoyant mind, a mind that accepts, yeah, that happened and this is real, now you become more efficient at what you do while you're doing it because you're not clouded by the dislike of that situation. This is really practical stuff. And the more you can get into having that equanimity, it's okay. There's a sutta here that is really an amazing sutta. I was using it just about every time I gave a talk. Okay, and this is fairly short. It says, monks, there are these 5 courses of speech that others may use when they address you. Their speech may be timely or untimely, true or untrue, gentle or harsh, connected with good or with harm, spoken with a mind of loving kindness or with inner hate. When others address you, their speech may be timely or untimely, and it goes through that whole thing. Monks, you should train thus. Our minds will remain unaffected, no matter what somebody says to you. And we shall utter no evil words. We shall abide compassionate for their welfare with a mind of loving kindness without inner hate. We shall abide pervading that person with a mind imbued with loving kindness. And starting with him, we shall abide pervading the all-encompassing world with a mind imbued with loving kindness. Abundant, exalted, immeasurable, without hostility and without ill will. That is how you should train. Isn't that interesting? Then it says one more thing. Monks, if you keep this advice constantly in mind, do you see any course of speech, trivial or gross, that you could not endure. No, venerable sir. Therefore, monks, you should keep this advice constantly in mind. That will lead to your welfare and happiness for a long time. So somebody comes up and they start talking to you, make your mindfulness of them remind you to radiate loving kindness to them, no matter what they're saying. And use that person as the reminder to make that big bubble of loving kindness and surround the whole world with it. Huh?
Then they never stop talking.
Who stops?
No, they just keep talking to you because it's so nice.
Well, but that the point is, if you take offense at what somebody else says, what's happening in your mind? Dissatisfaction, dislike, and I don't like it, and it's mine. I wish this guy'd go away. This guy's a turkey. What he's thinking, it doesn't make sense. But when you start radiating loving kindness to that being, what happens is they start to change in their thinking, in the way that they're facing the world. At my monastery, sometimes people get unhappy with each other. Now, the rule at the monastery is, if you're going to fight, you got to come and fight in front of me. So, come into the cabin, heavy-duty words thrown at each other, really highly emotional. I'm not going to get in the middle of that. I'm not dumb. So what do? I start radiating loving kindness. Doesn't matter what they're saying. Absolutely doesn't matter at all. And before long, the highly emotional talk starts to calm down, and then it starts to be regular talk. And now people are starting to solve the problem, the misunderstanding that they had. And I'm still sitting there radiating loving kindness. And then they start laughing with each other. And then before long they say, well, I've got to go do all this work. Thanks, Bhante. And I didn't say a word. But I affected the world around me in a positive way. By radiating loving kindness. By not getting caught up in the words. It works when you can remember to do it. So this whole thing with the supreme use of the faculties is learning how to develop your equanimity and add that to what you've learned here and radiate loving kindness to people that are upset, or they're saying things that aren't very good. It's okay. They're flat out lying to you. So what? Radiate loving kindness to them. Their speech will change. Takes two to fight. So if you're not playing that game, you're not fighting, then the fight goes out of the other person. And then they start getting more and more reasonable about things. But if there's aversion to it, if there's ill will towards the person that's doing that, now there is two people there fighting. And that's how you start wars. So the more you can continually practice loving kindness towards everybody you talk to, make that your practice. And use the person you're talking to as the reminder, let's send loving kindness to all beings everywhere. Then you are affecting the whole world in a positive way. Now there's an awful lot of people, because of what's happening in the world and the craziness with the banks and all of this nonsense stuff, they get into their fear and their anxiety and their frustration and dislike of the present moment. They're perpetuating that. They're continuing that kind of thing happening because that's what they're imaging in their mind. Change the image. Radiate the loving kindness to everybody you see and you speak to. And the more you can do that, the less and less people will be afraid. People will be angry. People will be overly emotional about things. Okay. I've talked for a long time. Anybody have any questions, comments, statements, ideas? One last thing. Don't believe anything that I say. Do it and see whether it actually works or not. Everything in Buddhism is about direct experience and understanding. And if your understanding causes pain and suffering to you or someone else around you, then notice that and don't do that again. If it produces harmony and love and a peaceful mind, then do that over and over again. So radiating loving kindness to every person that you're talking to, what a wonderful reminder it is how your mind can be uplifted and happy. So you let go of the dissatisfaction of things happening in the present moment more and more, and you gain balance with it. With that balance comes the solution for the problem. Okay? Anybody? Yeah.
What was the short sutta that you read? What number?
It's called the Simile of the Saw, Sutta number 21.
Here's a handout. We got it.
Pretty amazing little sutta, isn't it? It's got kind of a neat story in it too. I don't go through that very often, but yeah.
What happens if someone physically assaults you?
Protect yourself. Do what's necessary. There is a story about Manindra. He was in India and he had this woman student that she got on the tuk-tuk, the three-wheeler, and somebody jumped up and they started molesting her, and she didn't know what to do. She fought him off. But she went to Manindra and she said, "What am I supposed to do if somebody is trying to do this to me?" And Manindra very calmly said, "Well, you send them loving and kind thoughts and take your umbrella and hit them on the head."
There was a lovely story, I can't remember if it was in New York or if it was in Baltimore, where these three old ladies were driving in a car and they came to a stoplight. And car and opened the door and grabbed this woman's purse. And the woman who was sitting next to the driver, these women were in their late 70s, you know, she got out and started pounding him on the head with her purse. You know, she had a purse like this big, and she was pounding him really hard on the head, and he was down on the sidewalk holding the other purse when the police arrived. And the other woman had called it in.
And the guy that was reporting this, I mean, he had a little recorder there, and he had his telephone so you could see what was happening, and these three ladies are just beating the heck out of this guy. And he's laughing so hard he can hardly describe it. Oh, the other one got out of the car, and now she's kicking him.
Seems like they just weren't going to stand for it. No way. I grew up in that neighborhood and you weren't going to stand for it. It's great.
That's a good point, Bhante, because I was always wondering if I were in that situation, what would I do? Because I keep reading the story about Sariputta, where he was known for his patience, and he couldn't get angry basically. And one Brahmin, I'm sure you know the story. One Brahmin comes around and very well known in that village, says, "You mean to tell me that no matter what you do to Sariputta, there's no way he's going to get angry? Leave it up to me." So he goes, and the students don't realize what he's about to do. And while Sariputta is, walking on his arms around, he goes and smacks him on his back. And Sariputta just continues walking, serenely. And the Brahmin is beside himself. He just falls on his knees and begs him for forgiveness. And Sariputta wonders, what happened? So, and then he describes him, and then these monks and the lay followers, attendants, they want to, really give it to him, to this Brahmin. And the Brahmin begs him to take him back to his house so that he could offer him dana and, alms food. So he goes. And then they catch up with him on the way out of his house, Sariputta, and they pull this guy out of his house and they want to beat him, the lay followers. And Sariputta says, "Why are you doing this? Did he do anything to you?" And they say, "No, Bhante, he did it to you. I mean, we can't tolerate this." He says, "Well, I forgave him." So later on, this story gets reported to the Buddha, and the Buddha says, I think it's either the Buddha or Sariputta himself says, he uses the analogy of Mother Earth, and he says, well, planet Earth takes in all the filth that we produce equally as it does any other beautiful thing. It takes the bodies, the filth, the sewage, everything. It never says, I don't accept this. And it's the same thing with Sariputta.
Yeah.
So I think it was the Buddha who commented on that. So now that you've described the not the hitting back part, but loving kindness to be sent to them and defending yourself.
Yeah. Loving kindness doesn't make you stupid. Okay, it really doesn't.
It does prevent bad things from happening.
It does. It seems to.
Yeah.
I don't have any trouble with tornadoes or things.
Well, could you perhaps read the 11 benefits? They're always familiar.
Not tonight.
Bhante, you might share that story of the man coming up and smacking you in the airport.
Oh, yeah.
That's a great story. Because it's just exactly what happened here.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was flying from Malaysia to America, and we stopped at Hong Kong. So I get out, and I'm walking down, and this man walked up to me, and he slapped me in the face really hard. And I looked at him, and I said, "Why did you do that?" And he said, "I hate you Hare Krishna." And I said, "Well, actually, I'm not a Hare Krishna. I'm a Buddhist monk." And I talked with him for a little while, and he actually bought me a meal. But I said, don't hit me again, please. Once is enough.
You said, here's a copy of my book. Now give me a donation.
But because I didn't overreact, and then I found out what the real problem was, and then started explaining some of Buddhism and how you have to have a balanced mind and that sort of thing. He bought me lunch. So I had to pay my dues to get that lunch.
The story about the guy who spits on the Buddha, is that in the Pali Canon?
Spits on the Buddha.
I heard the story that someone came up to the Buddha and spit on him, and the Buddha was like, "What else would you like to say?" And the guy got frustrated and left.
Sounds like
It sounds like a Mahayana story more than a Buddhist story.
There is a story of the cursing, though.
Yeah.
Not that.
Yeah, and then there's a story of the Buddha. This guy didn't like the Buddha, and he was walking around for alms round, and he invites him in, and then he tells the Buddha, "Get out," and then invites him back in and curses at him and "Get out," and he invites him in and "Get out," and he tried it one more time, and the Buddha said no. And there's a big story about his not accepting the nastiness that this guy was doing, so he walked on.
Well, he's got
Makes
some bad
sense.
karma.
Oh boy.
Oh, man.
He's paying for it.
Missed opportunity.
Yeah, there's a story about this big tub in one of the hell realms that's filled with molten lead. And these people do certain things and they get reborn there and they go down, and it takes 50,000 years to go down, and then it takes 50,000 years to come up. And they're up long enough to utter one syllable before they go back down. So when I was doing when I was in Burma doing the meditation, some of the jokes that happened with the monks about this guy and how nasty he was when he came to the monastery. He's going to do his rounds. He's going to get caught in that up and down thing. Go for a swim in the lead. But lead's poisonous.
Doesn't matter, you're in hell.
It's all poisonous.
Okay, yeah.
Regarding the hell realms, oftentimes I find myself when asked about Buddhist cosmology to describe certain, and I refer to the books obviously, and people have a hard time, to put it lightly.
Well,
these
in
realms-
America, yeah, they do. The Asians, the Burmese in particular, they really love these stories. Yeah, he's got a whole book of them.
Oh, shelf full of hell rooms. I love them. I know where they all are in the canon. Oh, especially the Petas. Oh, those hungry ghost realms. A lot of good stories there. Yeah. Some of the realm where you're
So
in hell
you're-
for, like, the night, and then you're in heaven during the day. Now that's interesting, because of some strange karma. You get both.
I generally try to stay away from most cosmology things, but I just ordered and have, and they're coming in May, 200 charts of all of the Brahma realms the Deva realms, the animal realms, the Peta realms, all of those.
How do the jhanas match up with the various realms, more or less?
He needs a chart.
Come and visit me. I have a chart. I'll go over the whole thing with you.
Well, the chart's on the wall at home.
Yeah, I think there was one there. When
It's online.
How did the Buddha deal with like theists of his day that would come up and
The what?
like theists, like people that believed in, Krishna or something like that, and asked him questions about that kind of stuff?
He always taught him the Dhamma.
He just avoided the.
Yeah, there was people that they thought they were real clever. Is the Buddha alive? Is he dead? Is he neither alive or dead? And they'd ask all these questions, and the Buddha would say, enough, that's only philosophy. Let go of that. I'll teach you the Dhamma. Because they were trying to catch him. And if he said one thing, then they would take the other side and argue. And the Buddha never fell for that. He said, I'm going to teach you the Dhamma.
He had a hard time.
Yeah, he
There's
did.
so many stories of people just arguing him and
But they
trying to
argued.
kill him, and poor guy was he was under attack a
But
lot.
they argued, and then he just presented. And he waited for them to figure it out.
Yeah, but I mean, he
That's
had
the
it
way
coming
he did.
at him.
There's a pattern
You know.
of training. So you came and you were externalist, so you presented it. And then he showed you how, he kind of baited you in front of him to figure out, that's not reasonable. And then he did that with annihilation of the Buddha. He just challenged him to the practice, because who was he? What was he?
And he spent an awful lot of time teaching Brahmins. Whether they started following him or not didn't really matter.
It was the society he lived in, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it would be like, America was 30 years ago. There weren't any Buddhists here, or if there were, they were in LA and San Francisco. But I mean, it's essentially, he was a Brahmin. I mean,
Yeah.
or at least
He was brought up
of the culture and
with that
educated
culture,
in
yeah.
the scriptures of the Vedas,
Right.
and he was highly educated in that. And I mean, most of the stories I read are these really brilliant scholars coming to debate him on certain issues, and he listens to them and then he questions them. And then by the end, it's like, oh, I want to join your argument. This is the action right here.
We were testing it, where I was at school, and we were testing it, like, was every one of them a solution through meditation? And we could show how every single one was, even when he confronted the Kalamas with some kind of situation they had, and he was ironing that out, it all comes back to the practice. Every single solitary time, it comes back to right effort, the solution. Every time. You can try to go through the text, you'll see what I'm saying. So it's right effort is the and why is that? Because he was a meditator and a meditation teacher. He never had any other occupation. Before he started his journey, he was a prince, but then whatever they say he was. Now they're arguing about what his father was and all that silliness, but he was very wealthy. And then when he became, what did he become? He became an ascetic and a meditator and a meditation teacher. So everything he solved, even governmental issues and statements he made to kings about how to govern, went back to the core of the practice. So that's what's fascinating about the teaching.
The reason I ask that question is because sometimes, like, people come up from a particular religion and ask a loaded question about something about God or something like that, and how does Buddhism look at that? And it's kind of tricky to answer those questions, like, because I'm not a scholar or anything like that.
Yeah.
I guess you guys must have experienced that where you live.
It's not an issue about
Well, I got something to share.
Yeah.
I was with Bonte in Missouri, and we were at a kind of a swap meet, and he was obviously in the robes,
some guy came up and asked him, well, what did, oh, you're a Buddhist monk, and he said, well, what did the Buddha think of Jesus Christ? And Bhatti said, well, the Buddha was, Jesus wasn't around for 600 years, so he didn't know didn't know of him. So it was interesting. The fellow listened to that and kind of accepted that and went off, but
The most interesting encounter for discussing Dhamma, though, and all that happened in Sri Lanka was when a Benedictine father came because his thesis was on his ideas of what Ticcasamuppada was, and he wanted to sit down and go over his versus my presentation, and we spent, I guess, 3 two-hour sessions doing that with another senior monk, and it was really fascinating interfaith dialogue between the core part of the Buddhist teaching and Christianity, and how he was going to use it to help people in counseling. It was really fascinating. So there are these places to hook in. I think we need to do more interfaith work, personally.
Okay, you can do that.
Yeah, I know. I have to figure out how to approach it.
Yeah,
you know.
it's tricky.
But there's a lot of stuff written now about Jesus having been basically Buddhist and coming back to a Judeo society and attempting to present Buddhism and ending it up with a Christianity. There's a lot more being written about this in the universities too. It's real interesting.
another Jewish boy teaching Buddhism. Oh, man.
But there's a real big alignment that can be pointed to and stuff, and the problem for Buddhism is when you label it a religion, then you have discussions you don't want to deal with. But when you look at it as a science of mind, it opens up doors more easily.
Yeah.
Because there's,
You know, an interesting thing about the Kalama Sutta you were talking about a little while ago. The Kalama Sutta, everybody sees and reads, is only the first part of the Kalama Sutta. The second part of the Kalama Sutta is what you're practicing right now. You're practicing the Brahma Viharas. And he goes through all of the Brahma Viharas. And that's the practice that he showed the Kalamas that nobody can fight against.
that's what I mean about, that was the solution. You always talk about it as a solution in the country for these people, and here it goes back to the practice for the solution.
Yeah.
Well, and the other way to respond to those questions, and what I always do, because I'm a minister, I get this stuff a lot, is I just ask them why they're asking me. You know, and if somebody is there, you know, because they're on a trip of their own, they're not really interested in discussion. So it's mine.
Yeah.
Actually, it's a discussion, then you do an understanding. You don't necessarily have to discuss some sort of dilemma.
Yeah.
No, someone asked me a sincere question, but that's a good point, yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah, so it's a sincere question, and then what I always do is, you know, if they come back with, you know, a particular set of beliefs, I always ask them, well, how do they experience that? And because they go back to what people experience, and by all kinds of ways things line up, and say, well, yeah, that sounds real to me, and this is the way I talk about it, and it's a different language.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I mean, sometimes it's crazy what happens. I mean, I came back to Bhante once and I said, I was talking to this woman and she just came at me and, do you pray? When do you pray? And I'm there like, all the time, when do you pray? And she just backed right off because I happen to know her and she might go to church on Sunday and that's it. And otherwise, I don't think she's really doing anything. But we were real heavy in loving kindness at the time. And the thing was learning how to do it all the time in life. And there's nothing wrong with a lot of the things that are taught in Christianity. But if people just go and do it Sunday and then just pow to each other the rest of the week, what's it doing? And that's with anything including Buddhism. How can you expect to get on the path reactive. You're only going to do it when you come on retreat, and then you go away, and then you just go back to normal things.
I would just take what I said a little bit further, sort of go on with
Go ahead.
what you're saying, is that there are lots of people, I think, in the West, I mean, who are sincere, who have had all kinds of experiences and touching the jhanas and all kinds of things, and may not necessarily have a framework for it.
That's right.
Are very stabilized. But if you really listen carefully to what they're actually saying, sometimes there are very, powerful states, and the only language they have is, Jesus save me, or something like that.
Right.
Yeah, or St. Francis of Assisi, and who was the other one? They try to go back to those two big experiences. They try to pull everything out of what happened to those two monks. With St. Francis of Assisi, and I can't remember.
Read The Cloud of Unknowing. It was his 14th century English work. Where he talks about being caught between the cloud of unknowing and the cloud of forgetting. And it's like, sounds a lot like a 7th or 8th jhana to me. And if you actually sort of read some of that stuff openly, it's very clear. There's a lot of those people with a lot of very deep experiences. Just
One of the most fascinating things ever happened was this guy came from Tulane University. Actually, I got him hooked on the internet, and we were talking about Arahat, and then the experience with Nibbana, and then he came for 2 weeks to be with Bhante when we were in another location, and I got to watch this guy. He came because he was quite well off his family, and they had given him the money to go all over the world to find the answer to what had happened to him and his experience. And basically what happened was he fell over into cessation, came out and saw the links, but had no idea what he saw. No idea whatsoever. And people were, that's nothing. And he knew it was, and there was a lot of different explanations. And then he went through this retreat with Bhante, and it was really fascinating to watch him learn the links completely and just be awestruck about how that's precisely, exactly what happened to me when I went through this. So you're exactly right. Here's a person totally outside of Buddhism. He was a professor at Tulane University, and he's started to, have this experience. He had this experience in meditation, just a routine meditation that he started doing. Obviously, he had done some work in another life, and he just, you see, but he didn't know what happened. That was fascinating to me. And just like you're saying, these experiences exist, like what is a Christian centering prayer is a good example. It's almost exactly what we teach, but you open it up with Jesus Christ and put it to bed with Jesus Christ. Amen. You see, and it's not the same thing because the relaxed step is not there. Okay, so they don't go as deep, but they certainly could be what do you call it? Tweaked to introduce that step. Twimmed. It could be twimmed, and everything would work perfectly.
That's worth a tweet.
A tweet. Exactly.
You wanna twim a tweet? Or tweet a twim?
Twitter it.
Tweak a twim. Tweak a twim. That's good. So it's,
I'm on Twitter.
May I address? Well, as if you study Buddhism's history, you see that actually Buddha was never against the existence of gods. I mean, they were coming down, bowing to his feet.
Right.
And in fact, one of his qualifications or characteristics, when you're saluting the Buddha, is the title of teacher of gods and men. Gods and men.
right.
So Brahmas, in their lifespan of billions and billions of years, they've actually persuaded themselves that, hey, so many existences are coming and going in front of our eyes. World systems are coming, sprouting, and then gone. So they had thought of themselves as gods until the Buddha showed up. So, and oops, we were dreaming all this time. So there was no question of theism or the Buddha being anti-theist or something.
It's one of the unique things. I mean, you go into the modern temples and you find the elephant god sitting there, or other ones like,
we're getting into
just kind of accepted.
Yes.
But
Let's let this part go. How about if we share some merit? May suffering ones be suffering free, and the fear-struck fearless be. May the grieving shed all grief, and may all beings find relief. May all beings share this merit that we have thus acquired for the acquisition of all kinds of happiness. May beings inhabiting space and earth, devas and nagas of mighty powers, share this merit of ours. May they long protect the Buddha's dispensation.